Is fishing a sport? I had to look this up, but apparently it is classed as one. It seems like a ridiculous way to waste an afternoon if you ask me. In all honesty, I have less than zero desire to partake in what is essentially a bunch of old geezers trying to avoid their wives by ruining a harmless fish's day. Just imagine if you were walking about town or something, just minding your own business, a nice looking sandwich shop catches your eye, so you go in and take your first bite out of that delicious foot-long meatball sub, only to get the roof of your mouth impaled on a spike that some asshole hid inside it. You're then pulled headfirst along the street, inspected for a bit by a man in a stinky trench coat, then dumped back into the shop with a bleeding mouth and a very confused mindset. You'd be wondering what the point in the whole affair was, and more than a little pissed off. I have only slightly more than less than zero desire to play a video game based on that experience. I'm not sure what demographic these fishing games are aimed at, but then people have weird crossovers in hobbies, and I'm certainly not in a place to talk about that. And come to think of it, bass fishing is an incredibly popular pastime in Japan, so maybe. And hey, Legend of the River King, for instance, is actually quite a captivating game if you give it a moment. That does have more of a JRPG feel to it though, so it'll be interesting to see how a simulator fares on the Game Boy. You're a professional angler competing against 99 others. There are a lot of options to choose from before you can cast off. You'll need to select your lure, of which there are many. Some are most useful for deeper parts of the lake, some the shallows. Some will help you if there are lots of lily pads in the area you're currently at, the areas where it's more shaded. You can also color your lures. Red is good for lower visibility times like cloudy or rainy days, or in the early morning and late afternoon, whereas blue is better at higher visibility times like midday. There's a lot to think about here. Your positioning is also important. You'll want to be in the deeper parts during the warmer parts of the day, as the black bass you're after tend to rest further down at these times, in the cooler waters I suppose. Early morning, they're more likely to be mooching about the shallows. Like I say, a lot to think about here. Once you've made your calculations, cast the line out by pressing A to activate the power gauge. The longer you leave it before pressing A again, the farther you'll cast the line. The screen then transitions to a pseudo 3D viewpoint, which allows you to see the depth your lure has sank to. You can to a certain extent move the lure about now, or reel it back in by pressing A. Realistically, the directional buttons will be sufficient for most situations. Once a fish's shadow is present, you can typically attract its attention with the D-pad. Once you've managed to snare the fish, you'll be able to see its species. If it's not a bass, I'd probably release it, which you can do by pressing select. Only the bass specimens are going to snare you the good prizes. Rankings are divided into 3 classes, Class 1 being the top 20 anglers, Class 2 being the next 30, and Class 3 being the rest. You start in the bottom one obviously, and your aim is to get to the top class, and then top it, over the course of 12 days of fishing. Each day takes place from 6 AM through to 6 PM, with the weather changing as the fortnight goes on. The time of day and the weather has some bearing on the fish availability, and also what type of lure you need to use. To make it to the heights of Class 1, you need to catch several black bass, specifically this species as opposed to the others, and have an impressively high average weight. The fish, not you. There is some degree of complexity and progression here. You have special techniques available, such as ways to make your line not break, attract the fish automatically, or catch without failure, but some of them require you to be of a higher class to utilize. You can move around the lakes, of which there are 2, but the second lake only allows access to those in Class 2 or higher. Visually, everything's fine I guess, but musically, it's really not up to scratch. The most basic square wave is used for every note, and the songs themselves are public domain classical pieces that you'd hear on a carousel ride at a theme park. It's not particularly flashy to look at either, but once you get your head around what everything is, it's functional enough. The game is a strange one. It serves as a pretty good simulation of fishing, I would imagine, and so if that's your bag, then go for it. I can't see this game appealing to a particularly wide audience on my channel, but hey, you never know.